Be'ez Hashem Yisbarach, we begin a new Masechta Nazir. So Nazir is to some extent a continuation of Masechta Nedarim. Discusses the halachas of a Nazir, which is a kind of a neder. Yeah, we'll see in the Gemara, it discusses how Masechta Nazir comes in to say the Noshim, but as far as the continuation from Masechta Nedarim, it's very clear why it comes as a follow-up to Masechta Nedarim. And as we'll see, the first blat discusses in Yonim that are mamish the same as the first blat of Masechta Nedarim. Now, just to touch the word Nazir itself, there are two different things that it says. We'll see from the Gemara itself, and it says that also in the Rishayim, benegay to the touch of a Nazir. The word Nazir means to be separated. When a person accepts upon himself Nazirus is the fact that he will not eat any grapes or anything that comes from the grapes, and he will not become tamei, and that he will allow his hair to grow long, not cut his hair. So the Nazir means that he separates himself. The idea of a Nazir is he wants to separate himself from Olam Hazeh. That's one type of Nazir. But then there's also another inyan of Nazir, which is an inyan of Kedusha. The Rosh brings it here on Daf Beis Amud Beis that there is an inyan of Kedusha that takes effect. When a Nazir accepts upon himself Nazirus, there's a certain level of Kedusha that takes effect. And as a result of that Kedusha, all these Yisurim take effect. So it's not a Stama Isser or Hafrosha that he has to separate because of this neder he made, but there's also an inyan of Kedusha. As we'll see later in the Masechta, there's a discussion whether there's a concept of Naziris by Goyim. The Gemara brings a special pasuk to learn out whether that there's no Naziris by Goyim. The Rebbe speaks about it by Riches and Asiche, that one of the aspects of this is because the inyan of Nazirus is not Stama Isser or Neder, but it's also an inyan of Kedusha, and that's Shayach Dafke by a Yid. Okay, and then as we'll see, the Gemara will discuss over here as well, similar in Masechta Nedarim, whether to accept Naziris, to become a Nazir, is a positive thing or it's a negative thing. There are karbanis you bring when the Naziris is up. Okay, we'll see in the Gemara. Let's begin. Zakt Eilige Mishnah, Kol kinuye Naziris ke Naziris. When a person expresses the fact that he wants to be a Nazir, so there are the actual words, to the basic way to say that you want to be a Nazir is just to say, hey Nazir, I'm going to be a Nazir. But then there's a kinui. A kinui is when you use a substitute. You use a different expression which is not exactly the same as the lashon of the Naziris itself, and that takes effect as well. And the Mishnah will soon specify what those kinuyim are. Now, the Mishnah here continues to explain another halacha, not the halacha of kinuyim, but a halacha that's called yadayim. What's the halacha of yadayim? Yadayim literally means a handle of a keli, meaning there's the keli itself, and then there's the handle that you could hold on to it, and it's not the entire keli itself. It's the same thing also when a person speaks. You can speak in full sentences or full expression where you say completely what you want to say. And then there's a yat, when you say something which is incomplete, but what you said gives us a clear indication what you meant to say. So that's what's called a yat. So the Mishnah gives examples for this. A person says, I will be Harei Nazir. So even though he didn't finish his statement, he just says, I will be. He didn't say, I will be a Nazir. He becomes a Nazir. Okay, so the Gemara will explain how that could be. How do we know what ahei means? It could be anything. Okay, we'll see in the Gemara. Oi ahei noeh. Person says, I will be handsome. Nazir. He becomes a Nazir as well. The lashon of noeh refers to Naziris, as the Gemara will explain. Now the Mishnah comes back to explain the first case it mentioned, which is the halacha of kinuyim, when a person uses a substitute instead of using the actual word Nazir. So if a person says, hey, I'll be, he says nazik, naziach, paziach, these are various different expressions. So either these are words in different languages. If you remember, we learned about this concept of kinuyim in the Gemara Nedarim. Either it's words from different languages, that's one opinion. Another opinion is that it's just chachamu or masakin, different kinds of terminologies that can be used instead of the word naziris itself. So harei nazir, he uses these terminologies, he will also become a nazir. If a person says, Hareini kozeh, I will be like this individual that's a Nazir. Or he says, Hareini misalsel, I will be misalsel. The Gemara will explain exactly the source of the word misalsel and what it means. Or he says, Hareini mechalkel, also explained in the Gemara. And another term, Harei alai l'shaleach pera, also will be explained in the Gemara. So in all these terms, Harei zeh Nazir, he will become a Nazir. What's if the person, again, we'll see in the Gemara, let's wait for the Gemara. What if the person says, Harei alai tzipairim? Person says, I take upon myself to bring birds as a carbon. So the carbon of a Nazir includes also bringing birds. So when he says this, does that mean Nazirus or not? Rav Meir I'm a Nazir. Rav Meir says he will be a Nazir. Chachamim Oimrim ein a Nazir. Chachamim say this expression, he will not become a Nazir. Which will also be explained what the pshat of this machlokes is. Everything will be explained in the Gemara. Okay, so let's see. The Gemara begins first with the whole Masechta of Nazir. What's it doing over here in Seder Noshim? Seder Noshim discusses the halacha that relates to marriages, divorces, or anything between husband and wife. So why is Naziris here? Mechdi, let's see. Tana b'Seder Noshim koi. The Tana is discussing the halachas of Noshim. My time at Tani Nazir. Why is he learning the halachas of Nazir here? So the Gemara explains, Tana kro koi. The Tana is saying it here in Seder Noshim based on what it said in the pasuk. Because in the pasuk, when it speaks about Geirushin, about divorce, what does it say? That if a person's wife will not find favor in his eyes, why? Because he sees inappropriate behavior. She's having relations with other people, or she's behaving inappropriately. That's what leads to a Geirushin. So what the pasuk is saying over here, or what the Gemara is teaching us over here, is as follows: Mi garam la aveda. Who causes her to go and behave this way, to do these avedas? Yayin, because she drinks wine. That brings this type of behavior. V'ka'amar, and it also says that when you see such a woman that's behaving inappropriately, and that's the saita, when she went with another person privately, and then you have to go and figure out if she had a relation with him or not. That's the halacha of the saita. So if you see a saita b'kulkula and her in her situation, so what happens? So you make sure that you separate yourself from wine, so you shouldn't come to such a situation. So therefore, when we're discussing the halachas of marriage or divorce and a woman that gets divorced, how does this happen? Through drinking wine. So from that we come to the union of Nazirus, because Nazirus is separating, one of the things of Nazirus is separating yourself from grapes and wine. Okay? So the Gemara only explained the connection of the Masechta to Seder Noshim, but it doesn't actually explain the order in Seder Noshim itself. That the Gemara doesn't ask here. The Gemara discusses that in the beginning of Saita. And there it says that really, because of the hezbollah it says over here, Nazir should have came after Masechta Saita. But because Nedarim follows Masechta Ksubis. Why does Nedarim follow Ksubis? Because in Ksubis there's a perek that talks about Nedarim, regarding the obligations between husband and wife. So therefore we bring Nedarim after Masechta Ksubis. And therefore Nazir, which discusses also a kind of a neder, so therefore it follows after Nedarim. So that explains the order of the Masechtas within Noshim itself. Okay, now the Gemara goes to the order of the Mishnah here, the way it presents the halachas. The Gemara, Pasach b'kinuyin. The Mishnah begins with Kol kinuyin Naziris k'Naziris, that it's coming to explain these terms that are substitutes to the term of Nazir. But a mefarish yadis. But then the first thing it explains is not those substitutes. It actually explains half statements where a person does not yad, where a person just says a handle, a half statement. Why doesn't it explain right away the kinuyin Naziris? How does it explain Yadis if the Mishnah didn't even mention anything about Yadis at all? So Rava said, and others say Kidi. Kidi, according to most interpretations, means that this is something that was said, Kidi, without a name, without knowing who the Amayra was that says that they said this answer. There's something missing in the Mishnah. This is how you have to learn the Mishnah. First, the Mishnah mentions the substitutes that are used, that it's like the Naziris itself. And then the Mishnah says, when you use a partial statement in Naziris, incomplete statement, that's also like the full statement of Naziris as well, and the Naziris will take effect. And then the Mishnah explains, the following are the partial statements. So it begins explaining first the yades which it mentions, but you have to add into the Mishnah that the Mishnah is mentioning first two things. There's the kinuyim, and then it mentions the yades. And then it explains the yades first, and then it explains the kinuyim second. Frakta Gemara. Yades is a handle. That's the literal translation. It means a partial statement. Frakta Gemara velifraish kinuye bereisha. Why doesn't the Mishnah explain the expressions that are substitutes first? Just like in the order, the way it starts it off with. It says first kinuyim, then yada. So it should explain the kinuyim first. Answers the Gemara, Tana, mi'ahu desalik, ahu mefarish bereisha. The style of the way that Tana writes things is, the last point that he mentioned, that's what he explains first. So he mentioned the Yoda is second, so that's the point that he just mentioned, so he explains that first. And the Gemara brings a few examples for this. Kedetnan, as we find another Mishnayos. So we learned in the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos, it says, Bameh madlikin ubameh ein madlikin. What oils and wicks could be used to light Shabbos candles, and what could not be used? Umefarish, and then the Mishnah spells out what it mentions second. That's what it spells out first. Ei madlikin bereisha. It explains those wicks and oils that should not be used. It explains that first. There's another Mishnah there in Masechta Shabbos. Bamet taimnin ubameh ein taimnin. When it comes to insulating food, so in what are you allowed to insulate the food, and what are you not allowed to insulate the food for Shabbos? Umefarish ein taimnin bereisha. It first explains the halacha of ein taimnin, which it mentions second first. Another example. It explains regarding walking out on Shabbos with various different things. What's considered to be like a garment that you're allowed to go out on Shabbos, or like a jewelry that you are or you're not allowed to go out. What is she not allowed to go out with on Shabbos? And explains what she may not go out with first. So we see that the style of the Tana is that what he mentions second, that's what he specifies first. The Gemara, but Vatnan over there in Masechta Shabbos we learned in another Pedic it says, with what is a behema allowed to go out in Shabbos, and with what is it not allowed to go out? And it explains what it opened with first, what it could go out with the camel goes out, that's what it explains first. So over here you see that the Tana explains the first thing that it opened with, not what it was just saying the second thing. Another example in Masechta Baba Basra. So there the Mishnah says, Yesh Neuchlin Umanchilin. You have such individuals that are Neuchel, they inherit, and they also give over the what's the word over there that says? Neuchlin is to inherit, and Manchilin is when, got the word in English over there, but when...
Inherit.
No, there's another word. Inherit and bequeath, right, exactly. So that's l'moshel by a father and a son. So a father could give, the son inherits the father, but it could also be the reverse, that a father could inherit the son. Okay, that's the idea of Neichlin Manchilin. And then the Mishnah this says there's Neichlin v'loy Manchilin, and then there's Manchilin v'loy Neichlin, loy Neichlin v'loy Manchilin, and the Mishnah spells out all those cases over there. But Mefarish Eilin Neichlin u'Manchilin bereisha. The first thing that it spells out is the first case that it's mentioned in the Mishnah, the ones that are Neichlin and Manchilin. So again, I see that here the Mishnah spells out what it begins with. So now we have a problem. Sometimes I find the Mishnah spells out those things that it said second or last, and sometimes I find that the Mishnah spells out first. So what's the pshat in this? So the Gemara explains Elolo Oilam. So really, the pshat of here is Tani Hachi v'Tani Hachi. There are sometimes taka that it says like this, and sometimes like this. So what's the difference? Elohasam the Yisura de Nafshehu, when it comes to something which is an Isser, that it's talking about things that are allowed and that are accepted, and things that are Isser. So things that are Isser, so Mefarish Yisura de Nafshei Bereisha, because it's talking about an Isser on the person, so this is something which is more severe, something that's more important to spell out right away what the Isser is, so therefore it spells out immediately the Isser first. So that's why when it comes to, for example, Bameh ein madlikin, or Bameh ein taimnin, and so on, or Bameh ein isha yaitze, this is talking about an Issa that's on the person himself, so it spells out the Issa that's on the person himself first. Gabi beheme, the Isur, Aidi beheme hu, so this is an Isser that is on a beheme. It's not an Isser that's on the person. So therefore, the Asi mefarish, again, Gabi beheme, the Isura, Aidi beheme, who the Asi, so mefarish eteire bereisha. So over there, the Mishnah is coming to explain the Isurim that there are in a beheme, not an Isur that's on the person, so that's not something that's so severe, so therefore it explains the heta first. That's why it changes the order over there. And similar, Gabi yesh neichlin, by the case of yesh neichlin, nami mefarish ikir nachla bereisha. So over there, the Tana explains what the ikir inheritance, what the ikir halacha of inheritance in a regular case with a father and a son. So it starts off with the ikir halacha of nachla, so that's why it explains that first. Okay, so therefore we see that sometimes the Tana explains this first, sometimes it explains that first. It depends. If it's an Isser, it wants to explain the Isser first. It's not because it finished off with that, but because it's an Isser. I want to explain that first. But if it's something which is just about a Behemah, that's not an Isser on the person, so then it explains it in the order that it presented the halacha. And by Yesh Neichlin, the Gemara says, over there, it explains the Iker Nachla, wants to start off with the Iker halacha first. Elahacha, but now the question over here is Lifreish Kinuye Bereisha. Why doesn't the Tana explain the halacha of Kinuyim, which it mentions first? That should come first. So what's the pshat of the Gemara's question? So there are some that say that the Gemara's question is, based on what we just said, really the Tana of a Mishnah always goes in the order the way you originally presented the halacha. He starts with the halacha of Bameh Madlikin, that really should be what you explain first. He always goes in the order the way he presents the halacha. The fact that in those cases we just quoted that the Tana explains the Isser first, that's an exception. Over there he wants to explain the Isser first, so that's why he starts with what he just mentioned, which is the Isser. So over here, when you're talking about Kinuyim and you're talking about Yadais, both of them bring the Isser of Naziris. You can't say that one brings the Isser more than the other. So there's no reason to explain the second one that would be more of an Isser than the first one. So let the Tana go in the order of the way it said at L'chatchila. That's the rule, the way the Tana explains it. That's one pshat the Mefarshim say in the Gemara. Another pshat the Mefarshim say over here is that the Gemara is actually asking this based on the last point that it just said regarding Yesh Neichlin. By Yesh Neichlin, over there, why does it say the case of the father and the son regarding Yesh Neichlin? Because it wants to say the Iker din of Nachla first. The basic halacha, where you have the regular Nachla first, that's the father and the son. So over here as well, when it comes to these two halachas, the halacha of Kinuya Naziris and the halacha of Yadais. Kinuya Naziris is much more the Iker of Hilchas Naziris than Yadais. Because in Kinuya Naziris, the person's using the substitute for the Naziris, but he's saying a full statement. He becomes a Nazir by expressing a full statement of Naziris. That's the Iker Issa. That's the Iker halacha of Naziris. Yadais is already more of a Chiddush. Yadais is when a person said a partial statement, and still we understand what he meant, and therefore he becomes a Nazir as well. Why doesn't the Mishnah begin with the Iker halacha when he said a full statement first? So the Gemara answers, Elahainu tam, Yadais. So here's the reason why. It begins explaining the halacha of Yadis first. Hoyel va'asyin le midrasha. Since the halacha of Yadis, the fact that when you say a partial statement that the Naziris takes effect, it's learned from a drasha of a pasuk. We had this in the Gemara in the Darim, where it brought there the drasha from where we learn it out from. So because it's something that's learned from a drasha, chavivin lei. So the Tana has a certain, it's precious to the Tana to teach this first. It's a drasha, so it's something special. So that's why it explains the Yadis first. Fragt the Gemara, if so, v'liftach b'hoim bereisha. So if it's so special to the Tana, so let it open the Masechta with this thing first, with the Yadis. So that's more special. Answers the Gemara as follows: Tana ki maschil be'ikar carbon. When the Tana begins the Masechta, he starts with the ikar naziris. The Gemara uses the term carbon because one of the basic things by a Nazir is when you complete your naziris, you have to bring a carbon. So first the Tana starts with the basic naziris when you say a full statement, and it tells you that full statement could be said in various different ways. So it starts with the basic halacha, similar to what it does by Yesh Neichlin. But then only in Pirushi, when the Tana itself wants to come and specify and explain, Mefarish Yadis Bereisha. He explains the Yadis first because that's special to the Tana, since it's something that he learned out from a drasha in the pasuk. Okay, so this explains the order of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara will explain the cases of the Mishnah. So what did it say in the Mishnah? Ha'aymer ehei. A person says, "I will be." Harei Nazir. So he becomes a Nazir. That's a yad. That's a handle. It's It's not a complete statement, but he becomes a Nazir. Fragt the Gemara, how does he become a Nazir? Dilme ehei b'tainis ka'amar. When he says ehei, I will be, how do you know he means Naziris altogether? It's inconclusive. It could be I'll be what? I could be a Nazir, or it could be I will be in a condition that I will fast. So maybe it means something completely different. Amar Shmuel, so Shmuel explains, Kagoin shahaya Nazir over lefanov. The case here is when he said, "Hey, I will be," there was a Nazir that was walking right past him. So we understand that he meant to say that I'll be like this Nazir that just walked past me. So it's like the "Hey" is the word that he said, and the word Nazir he didn't have to say because the Nazir is right there in front of him. So it's as if he said, "Hey, Nazir." That's considered to be a yad, and we understand what he meant because the Nazir is right there. Fragt the Gemara, Leime Kasav Shmuel, shall we say, based on what Shmuel just said here, that Shmuel's opinion is Yadayim she'einon meichichais, when you have a handle, when you have an incomplete statement that does not clearly show That does not clearly indicate what it means, like having Yadayim, such a kind of incomplete statement, is not a handle. We can't base anything. We can't. The Naziris cannot take effect. That's what it seems like Shmuel's saying here. The only reason why a hay works is because you have the Nazir walking right in front of him. So the Nazir walking in front of him is mechiach. It makes it clear that he means to be a Nazir. And if not for the Nazir walking in front of him, so there, since it's not clear, he will not be a Nazir. That's what it seems like. It has to be 100% clear. So, what's the question on this? There's other places that Shmuel says that even if it's not mechiach, even a yad, when you say an incomplete statement, and even if it's not 100% clear what he meant, nevertheless, the incomplete statement is enough that the Nazir should take effect, or that the neder should take effect. So the Gemara explains, no, you can't prove that. There's no question here on Shmuel's opinion. Why? Because Omri, they answered as follows. If it's a situation that the Nazir is walking in front of him, so we're not going to have, it's not going to be inconclusive. It's not a equal 50-50 doubt what the person meant to say when he said, hey, and the Nazir is walking right in front of him, that maybe he meant to be a tainus, to be fasting, or he meant to become a Nazir. When the Nazir is walking right in front of him, so that itself shows that it means that he wants to be a Nazir. But for sure, in a situation where the Nazir is not walking in front of him, so over there, the reason why Shmuel says in such a case that the Naziris will not take effect is not because it's Yadayim She'em Mechichis. Over there, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing because we have no clue what this person means. It could mean tainus, or it could mean to be a Nazir. In other words, the point that the Gemara is saying is, the way the Rishonim explain this, that when a person makes an incomplete statement, there are really three levels to this. A person can make an incomplete statement in such a kind of a way that there's no yad at all, meaning there's no handle, there's no way to b'chlal see what the person meant. He's making a statement which is completely inconclusive. That's when a person says a hey without a Nazir walking in front of him. Without a Nazir walking in front of him, the Gemara is explaining now that means absolutely nothing. We have no clue what he means. When a Nazir walks in front of him, so the Gemara thought that that's a yad which is mechiach, meaning that it's something which is 100% clear what the person meant. Now the Gemara is explaining, no, there's a third category. There's something in between, meaning that when a Nazir walks in front of him, so then it's leaning in that direction. It indicates that he meant to say that he should be like that Nazir that just walked in front of him. But that's still called a yad she'ei mechiach. There's a handle, there's an indication that this is what the person meant, but it's still not 100% sure. True, the Nazir walked in front of him, but it's possible that he meant something else. So what Shmuel is saying is that if the Nazir did not walk in front of him, it's zero, there's no yad at all. When the Nazir walked in front of him, it's a yad she'ei mechiach, and he becomes a Nazir because it leans in that direction. The fact that the Nazir is there completes his statement that that's what he meant to say. But the Gemara still has another question on this. Perhaps, true, we know that what he said is associated with this Nazir that walked in front of him, but maybe he only said this, not that he's going to become a Nazir, but what he was saying was, I will accept upon myself those karbanis that this Nazir has to bring. That's what he meant to say, that I'm going to pata him from karbanis. Meaning he didn't accept upon himself the actual Naziris, but you're just accepting upon yourself the karbanis that the Nazir has to bring. So how do you know you actually meant to be a Nazir itself? Answers the Gemara, the Ka'amar Beliboy, that the person tells us that in his heart he was thinking that he actually wants to be a Nazir as well. In other words, it's not enough that the Nazir is Oivel Lefanov, he also has to tell us that this is what he was thinking in his heart. So until this point, the Gemara didn't bring up the point of Ka'amar Beliboy, and the simple pshat of this is because if there's no Nazir walking in front of you, so you could ask, just let's ask the person what he had in his heart when he said, hey. We had the question, maybe he meant tainus, maybe he meant Nazir. If he's just saying a hey and there's no Nazir walking in front of him and he's telling you that this is what he thought in his heart, it's not going to help because it's dvarim shebelev. If there's no Nazir walking in front of you, you didn't express anything. But if you hear, when the person is saying a hey, and we know clearly that what he said is associated with a Nazir because the Nazir is walking in front of him. Elamai, it's not clear if he meant the actual Naziris or only the karbanis of the Naziris. For this, the fact that he tells us that he was thinking in his heart to be a Nazir helps, and it tells us that this is what his words actually meant. So it's not just dvarim shebelev. If he tells us that this is what he meant, so then what's the chiddush over here that he becomes a Nazir? If he's telling us clearly this is what he meant, and you have the Nazir walking in front of him, shouldn't that be obvious and clear that he becomes a Nazir? And says the Gemara, Ma'al detema, because I would think to say, Be'inon piv liboy shavin. I would think that it's necessary for his mouth and his heart to be equal, meaning that it's not enough that he tells us that this is what I thought in my heart, and this is what I meant when I said. You would think that he has to actually express it, hey, Nazir. It's not enough that he's saying this so in his heart, and that the Nazir is walking in front of him. He has to actually express it in his mouth. Kamash Malan, that he doesn't have to actually express it. The fact that he thought so in his heart, and the Nazir was walking in front of him, is enough to combine these two factors together that he should become a Nazir. Okay, let's do one more piece over here. The Gemara goes to the next case of the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, if the person said, hey, Noah, I will be handsome, Nazir. That's the term that is means to become a Nazir. So the question is how? Fragt the Gemara, how do we understand from being handsome that it means to be a Nazir? Maybe he means that he's going to be beautiful, he's going to be handsome by fulfilling mitzvahs. The Tanya says regarding mitzvahs, that the Eibishter, I will beautify the Eibishter. What does this mean? That I become beautiful by the Eibishter, or I will make beautiful in front of the Eibishter. The Bach says, Esna lefanov. The mitzvahs that I fulfill, which means Es lefanov sukkah na, beautiful sukkah, lulav na, beautiful lulav, tzitzis na, beautiful tzitzis, Echtav lefanov sefer Torah na, I will write a sefer Torah beautifully, Vekrechenu b'shiroi naim, and I will wrap it in a beautiful mantle. So maybe over here, when a person makes a neder, a hey noah, is referring to fulfilling these mitzvahs in a beautiful way. Shmuel answers, Shetofus Besarei. That what we're talking about over here is that the person is grabbing onto his hairs, and he's and then he says, I will be beautiful. So if he's grabbing onto his hairs, so we understand that what he meant to say is that he's going to be beautiful with the hairs that he's grabbing onto, not beautiful b'negei to mitzvahs. So it's interesting that Rishonim over here explained that the Gemara gives a different answer than what it said before. Before it said the answer that there was a Nazir walking in front of him. Now it's saying an answer that he grabbed onto his hair. So the point, the way the Rishonim explained this is, before the person said, hey. So he mamish didn't finish the statement that he said. He just said one word, hey. So over there, the Nazir walking in front of him is like the completion of the statement. He says hey, and he doesn't have to say the word Nazir because the Nazir is right here. So so we like combine that Nazir that's standing in front of you to what you said, that it's as if you said hey, Nazir. That's why the Gemara gives there that answer. But over there, in that case, though, if the person would hold on to the hairs and he would just say hey, it wouldn't work because you're holding on to your hairs, but you didn't say the word Nazir. You don't have anything to complete the statement. You need an actual Nazir to complete your statement. But over here, when the person said hey, Noah, he completed his statement. He said a full statement. I will be handsome, beautiful. LOI, we just don't know beautiful in what way, regarding what. So over here, he himself has to do an action to hold on to his hairs to show what he himself meant. The Nazir walking in front of him, which is just a person walking by, is not going to help because you completed your statement. So just because the Nazir is walking in front of you, who says that what you said has anything to do with that Nazir? I completed my own statement. I said Noah has nothing to do with the Nazir necessarily. If he's holding on to his own hairs, then that interprets that he meant by Noah, he didn't mean the mitzvahs, but he meant the beauty of his own hairs, which he'll let grow long when he'll be a Nazir. That's the Taich of the Gemara.